Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Dependency-Track community meeting. Today is April 11th, 2025, and we have a great agenda for you today. So with that, a little housekeeping items. We encourage attendees ask questions in the chat during the presentation. If the questions are related to DT, we will attempt to answer in real time. Questions for our guest speaker, Monzo, can be addressed after the presentation. So on to you, Nicholas, for the agenda.
Yep. So for the agenda, we will have at first we will have the guest presentation from Monzo. Michael is here, who joined us for this. So very much looking forward to your presentation, Michael. Good you're here. Afterwards, for the boring parts, I will just discuss the recent bugfix releases of 4.12.x, also the upcoming version 4.13 release. And at the very end, as Melba already teased at, there will be an open Q&A as always. And with that, I will just happily dodge over the ball to Michael. Let me unshare my screen here.
Okay, did that work?
Yes.
Great. Thanks for having me. So I'm Michael McNair, staff engineer at Monzo. We've been using Dependency-Track at Monzo about 18 months now. And I'm just going to share some selected topics from our experience running Dependency-Track. A bit of a focus on the switch we did from our previous solution to Dependency-Track, and also the experience we have of running Dependency-Track as like managers of the solution. So these are the selected topics. I'll tell you a little bit about Monzo and the sort of problem we're trying to solve, the scale, the comparison we did from our old solution to Dependency-Track. Like I said, how we find maintaining Dependency-Track so people have to run it. Some info on how we went about generating bombs, the things that helped us, the things that hindered us, what we do with the findings that come out of Dependency-Track, how we make those more useful to our engineers, and then we'll do questions at the end. So every org's different. I think it's useful to share a bit about the kind of assets we have, the scale, so you can see how much of what I'm saying is likely to apply to your setting. Monzo is a bank, 10 years old, based in the UK, going global. We have two problems that we're trying to tackle in this space: managing the risk from known vulnerabilities in software that we run, and complying with the license requirements of the open source software that we use. These are the assets that we're talking about. Libraries, mostly open source, that live in about 6 or so repos that we call monorepos. There's more than one, so it's not exactly mono, but there's not many of them. Fairly homogeneous tech stack within each of these, not that many ecosystems. You can see I've listed them there. On the infrastructure side, we've got containers, we've got things that aren't containers, that are virtual machines, and we also have a few data centers with actual hardware running in them. And then on the endpoint front, all of our staff have laptops, and they're mostly macOS. So we care about vulnerabilities in all of these, and we mostly care about license compliance in the software library. At least that's the big area of focus for it. So what we used to have was something that looked a bit like this. This is a fairly simplified view, but it gives you the overall flavor of our setup. We've got the assets on the left, various scanners, some proprietary ones, some in-house ones, that tell us about vulnerabilities or license issues in these things. And then we wanted to centralize these different findings so that we could present a kind of consistent interface for people who have to solve them. So we import all the findings and then present them via various tools that engineers are already using inside the company. We've moved on from that. And the nice thing about this architecture is that a switch from this to using Dependency-Track and SBOMs is that we only need to swap out the scanner bit. Everything else can kind of stay the same. So that helped us. So this is what it looks like now. Same set of assets, but now we're generating CycloneDXX bombs for all of them, ingesting them into Dependency-Track, and then the existing things on the right hand side. So that from an engineer perspective, this change wasn't particularly impactful. They were still doing the same work. It's just that under the hood, how we were finding the vulnerabilities and the problems changed. But to make this switch, we wanted to be confident that we weren't going to be significantly increasing our risk, either because we were not learning about vulnerabilities that we had, or we get loads of false positives, and so engineers would be overwhelmed with sort of wasted effort, which would have the same effect essentially. So we did a comparison between our existing solution and various SPOM-based ones to give us the confidence that that wasn't going to happen. This is how we did it. We ran all the different scanners that we'd sort of picked from as a short list across a subset of our libraries that we thought was fairly representative. And wherever one scanner said we had a vulnerability and another didn't, we manually validated that and categorized it as true positive or false positive. Because if they disagree, then at least one of them is wrong. Or exactly one of them is wrong. This doesn't tell us how good, in an absolute perspective, our scanning is. We could be missing vulnerabilities that no scanner found, but it does tell us about the relative performance of them. And that's what we're interested in. Every single scanner that we used missed findings and reported false positives, which is perhaps not surprising. But the overall verdict that we came to was that it doesn't matter which one we use from this perspective. They're all quite good, or at least we don't have the absolute value. They're all pretty similar. And we could safely pick a solution based on the other properties of the scanners rather than the detection performance. And we picked Dependency-Track. I'm not going to go into the reasons. There was a lot of trade-offs, but this is the one we landed on. So one of the big unanswered questions we had once we decided to go with Dependency-Track was, what's it going to be like running this as the security platform team? We now own this. In Monzo, we've got an amazing platform if you're on the golden path. If you want to run a Go microservice, your life is very easy. Monitoring, deployment, upgrades, everything, it's all sorted for you. And that's what we do, is we run lots of different microservices in the security platform team. We never run anything different. So we were concerned about this aspect. Now we have this big jar file running in a container somewhere, which is all very scary. Anyway, the long and short of it all is kind of fine. We don't spend a lot of time debugging problems with Dependency-Track. It just sort of runs in the background. Obviously, it's not all smiley balloons. So some of the issues that we encounter, one is pod churn. At the moment, the API server is a single instance, as you probably know. Looking forward to when that's no longer the case. But for now, there's just one of it, and Kubernetes or AWS will occasionally kill it off, and it has to spawn back up somewhere else. And in that window, we get problems. That mostly just leads to noise for us as people monitoring it, and occasionally delayed PRs for people interacting with it because your pull request didn't get scanned. We also get various timeouts. So we delete projects, like to clean things up. For whatever reason, that's just slow and sometimes says, no, we need to retry. Very occasionally, that just deleting a project just fails altogether. I think it's a known bug. We need to go manually clean it up. And then sometimes we've had mystery timeouts that we don't think correlate with pod churn, but just something timed out and it fixes itself, it retries. So that just contributes like monitoring noise to us. On that topic, we don't closely follow the logs that Dependency-Track issues because we found them to be quite noisy and we haven't done the work to filter out the noise that we're not interested in. So what that means is there could be problems lurking that we could see if we had it integrated with our alerting system that we don't know about. Instead, we rely on all the services that interact with Dependency-Track to tell us when something's gone wrong. So we'll know if something goes critically wrong, but it's possible that something's going subtly wrong that we could know about, but we don't. We had previously other issues that have all gone away. Brief roundup of them. The biggest one was bomb processing bugs. Importing bombs was not a reliable process. Weird stuff happened, basically. To summarize, a whole load of different bugs that we encountered that all went away when bomb processing v2 came out in, was it 4.12 or something? All those hard to debug issues disappeared, which is great. There's a few policy violation bugs that we've had to work around that are sort of still there, but once we worked around them, it's fine. And then one that's not a dependency track issue, but an us issue was we found that PR scans were getting slower and slower, and the syncs we did were getting slower and slower until stuff started to break. And eventually we uncovered that every time we import findings from Dependency-Track, we leave a little note in the notes on the finding saying, imported this as ticket 123. And we were doing that every 15 minutes for every single finding. And eventually Dependency-Track and the database didn't like that. Anyway, so once we cleaned it up, that was fine. So that's running. I thought cost was interesting. We didn't really know how much it was going to cost to run. We kind of figured it wouldn't be that expensive. That was our sort of high level. It's not a significant factor in the decision of which system to choose, especially given the cost of our previous proprietary solution. So it's kind of three components to the cost. One is the services that we run that form our vulnerability management system. These are the sort of golden path ones I mentioned. Got like in the order of 60 pods doing lots of different things, not all to do with Dependency-Track, but just the whole vulnerability management system across staging and production. We've got the two API servers, one in staging, one in prod. And then on the database side, as mentioned, we are not infrastructure experts. We're definitely not database admins. So we wanted to pick the option that was the most hands-off we could find. And this is AWS's. You need Postgres, but you don't want to deal with Postgres solution, AWS Aurora. The promise is you set it up with minimum clicks and it will scale up and down for you. And it's happily delivered on that promise. We've not had any issues with it, but they charge us for the privilege. So these are the numbers, roughly speaking, of how much it costs us to run all this per month. And you can see that the database is not cheap. So TBD, it's a pretty good trade-off for us. I'm glad that we didn't have to become Postgres server admin experts in this, but maybe we will optimize this in future and move to a slightly less hands-off option. Oh yeah, I'm working for a bank. I get access to lots of lovely gifts to do with money, so I was quite pleased to find this in our template. Right, generating bombs. This is kind of, so anyone who's done this knows the core of a successful bomb-based scanning is having good quality bombs. So that's where a lot of the effort goes. Things that made it easier for us were the monorepos I mentioned. We just didn't have to do this that many times. Within each repo, we've got relatively few ecosystems. So again, there's just less work. This is something that comes up time and time again when working in security platform team, is the fact that Monzo has a consistent tech stack. Makes our lives easier in so many different ways. We can solve the problem once rather than many, many times. And finally, there's an abundance of tools that will generate an S1 for you. So we kind of picked one that was that like starting point. Our default was Sift, but then if there was ever an ecosystem or whatever where that didn't work well for us, there was no shortage of other tools. We could always find one that did work fairly well. It's not all roses. If we only had to deal with the vulnerability risk, generating the bombs would have been a lot easier. Having to manage license policy compliance means the bombs have to have accurate license information in them. I would say over half of the work we put, at least, into the bomb generation was spent trying to find ways to get good license data, whether that was trying different bomb generating tools, configuring them, doing like manual overrides, or whatever, fixing up the data ourselves. It was quite painful. Special shout out to Python licenses. Of the ecosystems I mentioned, Python has the absolute worst data. We did our best. It's not very good. The engineer experience isn't great. Often you'll import a dependency and it'll say, you can't use this, it's not got the right license, and it does. I worked on this, I'm scarred. Finally, the effort was not super scalable. We found we didn't find a solution where you could just go, okay, point this at a new repo, boom, we've got a bomb we can trust. Every single ecosystem, every different setup we encountered needed manual effort to validate and tweak and experiment and get the right bomb at the end of it. And in my head, I think this is kind of the proprietary vendor secret sauce. Is their promise is just run our tool, it'll work, and you'll get good license data. You don't need to mess with it. We've done all the messing for you. How much these vendors deliver on that, I don't know, but certainly from the license perspective, we've seen that. So I think my sort of takeaway from this is that this is where you'll spend a lot of your effort if you're doing a bomb migration, is generating the bombs. And I think this is the area where hopefully the open source ecosystem is just going to get better and better till we get to a point where you can do point and click. Findings. So our engineers who are solving these problems don't use Dependency-Track directly. They don't use the UI as a general rule. We take the findings from Dependency-Track and we make them better in various ways. First of all, we merge alias vulnerabilities. So if you've got like a GitHub security alert and a CV from MVD, we don't want to report that twice. So we do the graph logic and merge them into one and just report one. We also need to route it to the right team. So we embed ownership information either in the bomb itself. So it's like this component is owned by a security platform, or we annotate projects with the ownership information. And then we use that when we're constructing these issues. We also want to know, let's say we've got a CVE in leftpad.js or something. We don't just want to know that, and that somewhere in our web project, we're using leftpad and it's got this vulnerability, you need to patch it. You want to know the actual tree and the number of different places where it happened. So we extract that out of the bomb and include it in the finding. And then finally, if a vulnerability does affect multiple things owned by the same team, we ideally just want to report that once. So you don't want 5 tickets to deal with CV 1, 2, 3, 4 in 5 different places. We just want that one ticket and it says, you've got this vulnerability, it affects these different things. And that is that. And I think that's all I was going to talk about. So obligatory, we're hiring shout out. If you too want to come and wrangle Python licenses with me, then go to that website. There's various backend engineer postings you'll see that will end up in the pipeline that includes my team. If you don't want to wrangle Python licenses and want to build a bank instead, then apply for a different role, also on that page. So thank you to the team for having me and for making Dependency-Track in the first place. We recently become OWASP corporate sponsors with Dependency-Track as a sponsored project. I would encourage you, if you use Dependency-Track, to do the same thing. It's kind of small money for most corporations. It's really just admin work to make it happen. I will do questions now. And if there's any that we don't answer or you have any later on, you can find me on Fedi at Infrastructure Exchange or in the OWASP Slack.
Awesome. Thanks, Michael. So there are currently 2 questions. I'll ask the second question first since it's not from me. Valerio asked, have you tried Parlay from SNCC to enrich licenses?
I have not. I have not come across it. Would you recommend it?
Valerio, Yep, he says yes.
Okay,
Or she,
nice.
sorry.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if it's a he or she. But yep. And I had two questions. I was curious about how much time it took to do the transition from traditional scanners to just using SBOMs and DT, and how many people you have actually maintaining this solution.
Yeah. So our team is 6. So that's the answer for how many people are maintaining it. But we spend very little time on it at the moment, like I said. So it was kind of a big project rolling it out. But now it's, I don't know, a small amount of time for our floater every week to deal with any issue that comes up. Often nothing. The migration itself, I don't have a precise answer, but order of magnitude, it's like 8 months, 3 people, something like that.
Yeah.
It was quite a big project for us.
Thank you. Wow, okay, so there's definitely other questions coming in. Have you tried CycloneDX Go mod for SBOM generation? And that's from Vinod.
No, I think for Go we are using Sift and it works quite well.
Okay. And
Correctly.
Valerio has another question. How do you manage the deletion of DT projects spawn from a PR or from a branch that gets deleted after merge, so to reduce the
Yeah.
noise?
When a project like that gets created, we just label it saying temporary or something, and then we have a periodic job that goes through and finds all the temporary projects and deletes them. And this is the one that I said occasionally times out, but you just keep telling it, eventually works.
Okay. And then Vivek has a question. How do you migrate or move your SBOMs from place where you generated to Dependency-Track?
Depends on the solution. In every case, it comes via our platform. So we have API services, we call them, that sit around the edge of our platform that we've written. So you submit your BOM to them, and they in turn ferry it to Dependency-Track. How you get it to that API service depends. CI, in some cases, like continuous integration, or maybe OS query talks to it directly, something else.
Oh, I see Nicholas has his hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was quite interested in like the log noise that you mentioned, and that looking at logs was not really feasible for you at the moment. Is there something like we from the project side can do better for you to, or to make it easier for you to integrate the logs into your solutions?
The big one has already been done there, which was the JSON log output. Probably, but honestly, it's been a long time since I looked at the logs, so I don't have the specifics. Simple answer would be have less errors. Perhaps I don't know. I feel like if I remember correctly, there's a number of errors that are to do with ingesting stuff from the third-party services that are expected to some extent, but I'm not certain. I'd have to look.
Okay, if you get the chance to look at this, like please let us know. If there are logs that are just annoying, like we are more than keen to like lower the log level. Yeah, that would be great.
Another question from Vinod. Do you use Slack notification integration?
No, we do use Slack, but not via Dependency-Track directly. So we get the findings, we do all that post-processing we talked about inside our platform, and then it's a downstream process where we start talking to Slack. Dependency-Track doesn't actually know who to send information to, or it doesn't. It also doesn't have the finding in the final form that we want to tell people about. So no, we don't use that.
Another question from Vinod. Did you have any challenges using DT properties or tags to manage ownership information? Is there any particular reason for storing them in the SBOM itself?
Yeah, no particular challenges. We store them in the BOM because in the monorepo setup, it's not the case that a team owns everything in the repository. There's many different teams owning stuff in this one repository, and we wanted a single BOM for the repository. We didn't want a profusion of projects that were potentially being created and deleted as components change, as owners changed. We wanted one BOM that feels like a cleaner solution. Means there's less churn.
And Valerio has another question. In my current setup, I'm using CDXGen for the application supply chain and Sift for the container. Is this setup something you've considered?
Yeah, we looked at, we've got various different tools in use for different use cases, and we just picked one that worked for any given asset class that we were working with. So not specifically the one you described, but yeah, we're using CDXGen, we're using Sift.
And that was the last question.
Nice.
Anybody have any other questions before we move on to the next part of the agenda?
People can raise their hands if you would like to unmute, or you can try to unmute yourself if you want.
Going
Maybe
once?
I have a final question. So Michael, so have you compared the cost benefit analysis after migrating to DT from your previous proprietary solution, right? Like, how much is there a return or investment migrating to DT? Like,
no, we haven't done that. Not formally anyway. We're very happy with it. The non-functional benefits of this system are really high. The consistency we get, things like the NIST API shenanigans that caused a lot of problems for people a year ago now, were solved for us because we're centralized on this solution. We didn't have to solve it many different times. And then simply financially as well. Obviously, it's an interesting trade-off. The engineer time, we spent a significant amount of effort doing the migration versus the OpEx sort of costs. But yeah, we're pretty happy.
yeah, it seems like the Valeria had same question in mind. Maybe I will add one more question. Like, I don't know if you can answer it. If you don't, that's fine. What kind of vulnerability sources you are using in DTs? Like, is it something you can disclose, like GitHub advisories, NVD, OSP, or which exit sources you are using? Like,
yeah, all the sources, pretty much. Not quite, although we're looking to change that. Yeah, so far our experience has been more is better. At the very beginning, we didn't have all the different OSV ones enabled because of the issue that Niklas found with OSV were misusing alias fields, if I remember correctly. But they fixed that, and so now we have them. Or at least they fixed it for the ecosystems that we're using.
So I know a few
We
more
don't
questions.
have to share. Sorry, question from what?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do we have to share our response with everyone? No, we don't. We have regulatory requirements for like managing our vulnerabilities and license compliance, obviously legal requirements, but that doesn't entail actually sharing our response with anyone.
So do we have time? I think there was one that we missed. Do you generate single SBOMs for the whole repo, or do you generate separate ones per language/product?
It depends. The end state that we want to be on is single per repo. I think there's even some merit in going bigger than that, but in some of them, yeah, the easy solution was split per language.
Okay, so with that, there's no more questions in the chat, but I know that we have other things on the agenda. Thank you so much, Michael, for your presentation. And if you have additional questions, please feel free to continue the conversation in the chat while the rest of the agenda is in motion. Nicholas?
Thank you.
I think Valerio was raising his hand again. Sorry if we
I did not
skip
see
you?
that. No, I did not see that. Sorry.
Can you unmute yourself, Valerio, or do we need to?
Oh, yes, perfect. Yeah.
Oh.
Wasn't working before. Thank you. Yeah, the thing I've noticed is this one. I try to work on a monorepo, multiple applications. And then the goal initially was, let's generate one SBOM that is omnicomprehensive. Now, what I notice, and I don't know if it is me or if it is a bug from Dependency-Track, is that the SBOM that I generate contains metadata, component, and then another field components. And that components contains correctly all the sub-application of this monorepo. What happens is that when I send it to Dependency-Track and I get it back, this component is stripped out. And that generates one thing, which for me is a problem. I don't see the graph generated in Dependency-Track because it is assuming that one of the dependencies, the UID, the BOM ref, needs to match with the metadata.component. There is indeed one match, but the depends on of that BOM ref is empty. So it says there is just one root element, but there are no dependencies here, and doesn't draw the graph. And you can also see this kind of warning in the logs that was not able to find a chain of dependency. And I was not able to find an issue in Dependency-Track. I don't know if, then I assume it is me. I don't know if you guys were aware of this.
I can say something to this. So what you're referring to is basically the assembly functionality in CycloneDX, right? Where one component packages multiple other components, which is not necessarily the same as one component depending on another one. And the dependency graph should normally work, I will say it like this, as long as your metadata component is the root in the dependency graph, right? As you already alluded
Yes,
to.
exactly.
And so what we're doing currently, because we don't yet support assemblies, during the import we flatten the component structure. So everything is pulled up one layer, if you will. So when you export the BOM again, no component should be missing, but probably the structure would be, as I said, flattened. Is that what you're seeing, or are components really missing? Because that would be a bug for sure.
No, there are no components missing. The components as supply chain components, they are all there. What is missing is the relationship because apparently, currently, Dependency-Track assumes that there is only one root in that project and everything depends on that root. Instead, I think that what is missing is a shift towards an approach that is multi-root. So multiple application, and then each application will have its own supply chain. Because if I run a check on this file and I try to correlate all the elements, I'm able to rebuild this multi-root graph. So the information is there, but it's not correlated.
Maybe Steve, I'm not sure if you're listening in or if you're able to talk, but can you maybe Steve, you know something about this? To my understanding, there's only one dependency graph structure in a CycloneDX BOM, right? So you cannot have multiple roots of a graph, or you cannot have multiple graphs. I'm not sure how practical.
Yes and no. So there is only one metadata component. However, it's quite common for you to have multiple deliverables in a given product, right? So you might have a solution that encompasses 3 or 10 different products. And so you would represent that with metadata component.components. So the metadata component is the solution, the abstract thing that you are delivering. And the metadata components is all the individual products essentially that are shipped with a given solution. So there are certainly ways to achieve this. We did not want to give it unlimited flexibility, such as metadata components being an array, because then you could essentially have an array of arrays, which is going to get really, really complicated when it comes to describing what something is about. So there is a way to do it. But at the very, very top, there is only one metadata component. But you can have a representation where you are describing dependency relationships of multiple products simultaneously.
Yeah, that is exactly what I've noticed. And the repositories that I've used, if you want to try it offline, is I think Brooklyn UI library or Brooklyn library from Apache. And that metadata component basically is the parent POM. And whatever I find in components, those are the various deliveries, as you said. But apparently this information is stripped out once the dependency track process it. Anyway, thank you.
You. And Nicholas, I think we can move on.
Yeah, sure. Let me just reshare my slides here. And find my own window. Okay, so just a quick recap about the last few bug fix releases that we had, just to give you an overview. We released version 4.12.4 and up to 4.12.7. In one of those releases, I think it was 4.12.6, we resolved a possible local file inclusion vulnerability that was exploitable via notification templates. So for those who are maybe not aware, in Dependency-Track, you can create custom publishers, is what they're called in the admin panel, where you can customize the templates, for example, for the Slack notification or for the email notification. And the library we used, or the templating solution we used, allowed for file inclusions. This got disclosed to us responsibly, luckily. It also got fancy GHSA and CVE as identities. But just to summarize, you need system configuration permissions for this. So you basically need to be an admin of the system in order for you to be able to exploit this. And you need to be in control of the system that receives the notification, right? Such that the local file content is embedded in the notification content and you can then look at it when you receive it. So that's how you can exploit it. It was a medium severity vulnerability, but still you should be patching this if you can. Then if you remember from the last community meeting, we had Michael from Wireless Cars here, or Wireless Car, and he outlined that the dependency-track instance that he has basically needs to be restarted every day because it ran out of memory. And of course, that was not something we wanted to happen, right? So we addressed this by making various background processing tasks more efficient. And the feedback I got so far is that it has worked, so that the memory consumption is down, and the application is able to release memory sooner or more freely. So hopefully no more out of memory exceptions. If, just like Michael, you run into these into these situations where Dependency-Track just fails to operate due to memory pressure, please just let us know. That is not what we want the system to behave like, right? Otherwise, there were a few, the NVD mirroring via REST API got broken a few times. This was fixed. If you rely on the mirroring of the NVD contents, you should also update, of course. There were multiple fixes for the Trivy integration and a lot more. I linked the changelog on the site. And of course, the slides were shared in the chat before, I think. So feel free to read those changelogs. Then for version 4.13, let me begin with saying we originally planned to have it out before this very meeting, but sometimes life just doesn't work out like that. That being said, the release is very, very imminent. All but one last feature PR has been merged or have been merged. We have tested all the migration paths from older versions. The changelog is already drafted and ready to be merged in. It was already reviewed from team members. We are currently in exchange with community members on the last feature PR. We just want to make sure we're getting what the community is expecting, right? A few feature highlights here: collection projects. This was presented and demoed in the January community meeting. Whoops, jumping ahead. A new feature that was not yet demoed is the scheduled summary notifications feature. So at the moment, when you configure notifications, right, everything just gets fired out by the system as soon as it happens. So if multiple vulnerabilities are found in close succession, you get quite a lot of Slack messages, and the alert fatigue is quite high, I would say. So what we're doing now is we're offering you options to schedule notifications and then have those notifications contain a summary of what has happened since the last time the notification was sent. So you could configure this to get notified about new findings in a project every day or every few hours, whatever floats your boat, really. We also discussed in a previous meeting, there will be a new API key format, and the API keys will be stored more securely. Namely, they will be hashed, which also means that you really should do a backup of the database before you perform the upgrade to 4.13. This is also mentioned quite prominently in the change logs, because once those API keys are migrated to their hashed version, there's no way for us to get them back. That's the entire point of hashing. So if you, for whatever reason, need the plain text keys before you do the upgrade, make a database backup, and possibly also go into the administration panel and note down all the keys that you may need in the future. Because after the upgrade, you will only be able to see a small prefix, essentially. We also further reduced the memory footprint on top of what we did for the last Bugfix releases. And we also made some slight adjustments to the logs. So one prominent case is whenever Dependency-Track handles a request from a client, it now attaches more context to the log, such as the authenticated user, the request path that was requested, and the request method. So now if something fails, or if an audit log message gets printed to the logs, you can see who triggered that behavior, which if you monitor logs, hopefully Michael soon will also monitor his logs. This should be useful for you. Someone is unmuting. Any questions?
I had a question actually. Yes, thanks.
Yeah.
The guidance used to say 16 gig of RAM for the API server. I forget exactly where it said that, but I definitely read that somewhere. Is that still the case? Have we looked after reducing the memory usage?
That is a very good point. I would say it has not been the case for quite a while. I think the recommendation of 16 gigabytes has been quite high, just in order to avoid people to run into problems, regardless of how large their instance is.
Yeah.
If your instance is, okay, before I say wrong numbers, I would say maybe start with 4 gigabytes and then see if something blows up, and then gradually increase over time if you run into problems. But I think a medium instance should be just fine with 4 gigabytes or even lower, if I'm being fully honest.
Thanks.
So I will take this as a hint to update the guidance in the documentation. That's good. Where was I? Yes. So I mentioned the collections projects demo and the API key format change we discussed in previous meetings. You are highly encouraged to view those because we don't have time to go over them in detail now. But yeah, they are on YouTube, just like this call will also be on YouTube with recording. But there is a new thing that we wanted to discuss in public before we push it out, right? And that is telemetry, because at the moment we are really flying blind, just like many other projects out there. We have no idea how many users actually upgrade to the newest version. We have no idea which version is the most used at the moment. As soon as someone downloads the project, we have no more further insight, right? So we don't know, are users rolling back from upgrades because like there are bugs or any breaking changes or something. Maybe they're just not aware that a new version is available. That could also be, or we've been trying to publish Bugfix releases more frequently in the recent past. We don't know, do people actually install those? Is the effort actually worth it? We also offer snapshot versions of of the next upcoming version. We have, again, no idea who is actually if people actually deploying these and testing these. Also with the upcoming upgrade to version 5 of Dependency-Track, no idea who actually adopted it already. And after version 5 becomes generally available, we also are blind, who is still using version 4? Do we still need to maintain and provide support for it? Similar story for databases, a very common problem for us. We have no idea, are people using MySQL, Postgres, MS SQL, or H2? We support 4 database systems at least and have no idea, can we drop some of them? And if people are using embedded H2 in production, for example, which we highly discourage, no idea. Do we need to do a better job in discouraging them? Who knows? Are people even using MySQL anymore? We think not, but we don't know. And also, if we want to raise the baseline of a database version that we can support, we don't know how many users are we going to impact with this change, right? Same story for version 5 for the migration. Again, we will need to have a database migration. No idea which database system we need to prioritize for this to happen. So really just a problem all open source projects will have. No idea about any of these things. We don't have this data. There's no possibility for us to get it. So what we are going to do, and like, please stay with us in this one. What are we actually trying to collect? Or what are we collecting? What are we planning to collect? First, the system ID, and the system ID is really just a randomly generated UUID. There's no further meaning to it other than it's just random and it identifies your system uniquely. And we will mostly use it to correlate multiple successive data points just so we know that like this system has upgraded to a newer version over time, right? Again, like example, everyone who's seen a UUID before, this is nothing new for you. We will collect the dependency track version, for example, version 4.13 in this case, the database type, for example, Postgres, and the database version. And that is all. We will not like collect IP addresses, or we will not store it. We will not collect or store portfolio information. So how many projects do you have? How many vulnerabilities, etc. That is not collected. And anything like in general, anything not listed on the slide before. How it's going to happen is this is opt out. So if you do not want to send this information to us, you can disable it, but it's enabled per default. We collect this information once daily, and it is first collected 1 minute after the first launch. You can view the data that was last submitted in the administration panel. I will show you how that looks like in a few moments. And there are multiple ways to opt out because we know like telemetry rings a lot of alarm bells for a lot of people. So there are options to opt out. And it is disabled for common development and testing setups, just so we don't like flood the system essentially. The first way you can opt out is via environment variable. This here is showing an example is with the Docker Compose setup. This variable telemetry underscore submission underscore enabled underscore default. You can set this to false, and then at the first launch of the application, it will disable telemetry going forward. This has no effect if you already started version 4.13 before. So if you did this, then you need to use another option to opt out. The most prominent being the administration panel. There will be a new option here under the configuration section where you can opt out, and it will, if you had it enabled before, it will show you what it has submitted and when it submitted it. So we're really trying to be as transparent as humanly possible with all this. Still, if you are not fond of setting this environment variable and you don't want to use the UI for whatever reason, you can also just use the API. So if you have deployment automation in place, you can put this in your Ansible script or whatever and disable the setting via REST API as well. Again, all of this is also documented in the documentation. It will be prominently listed in the changelog. So we're not trying to hide anything, right? Yeah, and that is honestly pretty much it, what I have to present. We had previously planned to do the Monzo presentation at the end, but now we put it first. So I would open the floor for questions. Just one more thing, again, release of 4.13 is really imminent. It should be out by the end of this week. So yeah, no more running away from it.
We did have a question from Roland. What is the status of version 5?
That is a very good question. We would love to have discussed it here, but we're kind of crunched on time, obviously. We are making good progress. There are some architectural changes that we're currently going through. We're making changes to the permission model. that we to make it more flexible, so to speak. I think it would make sense to maybe allocate the next community meeting, possibly only to version 5 or Hades, as we call it. I would love to give like a thorough rundown over what has been happening over the past months and what we're planning to do and how long it will take us still. Yeah, but making good progress. We're just not quite there yet, if that answers your question. Probably doesn't, but I attempted.
Does anyone else have any questions? Please feel free to raise your hand and then come off mute. Or type in the chat. I don't see any questions coming in. Going once. Going twice. Usually when I say, done, somebody chimes in at the very last second with a question. Okay, so it seems like there are no more questions. So I think we can wrap up.
Awesome. Perfect.
Okay. So thank you all to, all the community members for attending today and supporting the Dependency-Track team. So thank you to our guest speaker, Michael from Monzo, for joining us today.
Thank you.
Recordings are uploaded to YouTube within a day or two. And I can post where you can find the recording. And I've also posted, if you aren't on our Slack channel, if you don't have our community calendar or don't know where our GitHub repo is because you're new here, I've posted that in the channel. So please, we're here. We definitely welcome any help, any feedback, and hope everybody has a good day.
Thank you.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.